Thank you. 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts on the city budget. My name is Laura Lindberg. I live in the wonderful Ward 2. Good to see you, Councillor. And I love this part of our great city. It is so wonderful. I have a business background, and like all of you, I have become increasingly concerned with climate change. As a result, I've actually started my own sustainability consultancy to offer information and inspiration. And we each have our own reasons, right, to be worried about climate change. Maybe it's your children, maybe your grandchildren, maybe nature. I was so proud when the city passed its accelerated net zero by 2040 target. We must ensure we are on track to achieve it. There are other concerns in the near term, inflation, maybe a recession, but the climate crisis is truly unlike any other crisis. Mostly it's not visible, so it's really easy to push off the investments to a later year, or sadly, maybe to a later generation. And it has some uncertainty, yes. How catastrophic will it be? And when? And where? Yes, uncertainties, but unlike other crises, the climate crisis is going to be longer and larger. So you've probably heard that every job is a climate job. I believe that. What you do, each of you, on climate is going to be your legacy and my legacy for our children, our grandchildren, my hypothetical future grandchildren, and nature. So I respectfully ask that you dramatically increase the spending on climate actions exactly in line with what Transform TO requires. And the additional costs, I believe, to our city, if we delay, are going to make things like inflation and recessions seem like minor issues. The more we spend now, the less we'll have to spend later. And there's so many best practices to choose from. We're a C40 member, so you already have access to all the greatest ideas. And Toronto is Canada's biggest city, so what we do, what you do, matters so much to all of Canada and to the rest of the world. So I'm just going to speak really briefly to the two biggest sources of Toronto's emissions: transportation and buildings. So on transportation, in addition to just buying the new electric buses and city fleet, there's probably a ton of planning work that needs to be done. Where are all those buses going to be housed? Where are we going to put all of the battery maintenance and storage and charging infrastructure? What are all the new skills and training that are required? How do we hire those people? Let's move on that so that that is not our backlog. I've been so inspired by stuff that I've learned on transit in reading about many cities that have made their transit system the default. Big cities making transit the default. I mean, if people knew that every bus would have a maximum wait of 10 to 15 minutes, had dedicated lanes, had lots of routes, and that they could wait in a nice, large, well-lit, safe bus shelter, who would use their car? And then soon, who would bother owning a car? And then let's add to that super high parking fees and free passes for seniors, students, and low-income residents, and suddenly you have transit transformation. And other cities have done this. We can do this too. Now the cost, right? Oh, the cost. I'm sure there's lots of ideas, but one of them that I listened to recently with interest was T's proposal to add a commercial parking levy to fund the gap. I fully support this idea, and I know it's been proposed before. And I heard the mayor's concerns on the radio on some of the logistics. So if there are logistical concerns, why don't we add 2 or 3 cents to fund those concerns? And then if we don't need them, then we ratchet it back. But let's put extra money in to make sure that we can do that. But maybe it's just time to look at it again and try it. Let's just experiment. I drive when I can't take transit, but I would not be averse to a high parking fee. And I personally don't know anyone who would. Buildings, that's another big project.
Can you please wrap it up? It's over 5 minutes.
I'm sorry. Buildings is another huge opportunity, retrofits, heat pumps, very little information to be found. Would be wonderful if we could do it. So please
Thank
don't
you.
underfund climate. Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for your time.
Questions? Questions? No. Just a question. As
Yes,
far
ma'am.
as the parking levy, we've been speaking to some of the BIAs where, as you know, that during the pandemic, a lot of these small businesses have gone out of business, and they're just trying to survive now. And so if you put the parking levy, it not just impacts the big malls, it also impacts the churches, community centers, strip malls, all these small businesses that are trying to survive. So are you aware that this would have a huge impact and the revenue generated would not be as much as you anticipate?
I think there have been several studies on it, so I'm sure you have far more information on it than I do. When the pandemic started, what I did was I completely changed my shopping habits and went only to small business. I understand it. I'm a small business myself now. And I'm sure you could exempt the smallest businesses, you could exempt churches, you could exempt small strip malls. I'm sure that there are ways in all of these reports to figure out how we could do it equitably. And I'm sure you're more of an expert on that than I am. But thank you for the question.